Alright guys, greetings and salutations. I hope everyone is doing well today. Today I have an interview from a subscriber out of the Great Smokies. Before we get into it though, a couple links. As you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, and my merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. The links to Patreon and PayPal are in the description below, my merch displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman Frightening Encounters Volume 1, 2, and 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeffrey Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, the links to which are also in the description as well. And last but not least, if you'd really like to help this channel to continue to grow and go, just simply subscribe and hit the like button. It's free and it only takes a second. Now, everyone, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's get on with today's upload. Shall we? Alright guys, like I said, and like he said, we would get another interview with him. I have Jody back. Jody, how are you?
Pretty good. How about you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for taking some time out of your day, and I appreciate it.
I appreciate you having me on. I really do.
Well, you know, I am very happy with meeting you, and you've got a lot of really interesting stories. I like just, me and you were chewing the fat, and I was like, you know what, let's just kind of record everything that we're just chewing the fat about. And we had a pretty interesting conversation going where we were talking about lately people spotting dogmen in more of these cryptids on the East Coast. And you brought up the subject of fracking and that possibly being one of the reasons why these strange, not just dogmen, but other kind of strange creatures are being seen.
Yeah, a lot of things are being seen that people's never heard of. And it's hard for them to even describe them.
Yeah, most definitely. I know that, you know, like down in your area in the Great Smokies, there's been sightings of kind of like these predator-like creatures that kind of blend into their environment. And I think that is something that possibly could have came from somewhere else or had just been hiding, you know, in caves, dwelling there, waiting for the right time to come out.
Yeah, or when that fracking happened, it could have broke things loose and they had a way out.
Yeah, most definitely. It's definitely a strange times are happening right now.
Yeah, definitely. And you know, towards the end of time, it said would be said, you know, animals wouldn't be afraid of humans.
Yeah.
And they ain't.
No.
I mean, you see deers walking up to people.
Yeah.
You know, and used to, you'd never see that.
Nope. Nope. I mean, look it out in where just like Colorado or something. They got bull elk coming out, walking through towns and stuff like that. There's
right.
No issues,
right.
Just walking right through traffic, and you know. So.
Yeah. And bears, some towns, bears are running rampant, you know, and they're not a bit afraid of people.
No.
And that's scary, you know, especially for having children out. You know, that's real scary.
Absolutely. Let me ask you something. Now, the Great Smokies, everyone knows, is a very large park. There's a lot of wilderness there. Growing up in that environment, in that area, have you had any hearings of feral people? Have anybody that you've known spotted any of these feral people that they're saying that live in these cave systems out their way?
Well, you know, this happened over here right across the mountain from me with Cody. That was like,
Yeah.
a few years ago. And I honestly think that was a feral human. And because, just the way he described it with having skins on it.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't look like it had, it had a big beard. I do know that. He said that. But it was huge. It was massive, like it lifted weights all its life. But you live in the woods, then you're gonna have to move things, and you're gonna get big.
Yeah, you're almost like farmer tough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we had went back years ago. We had went to the Cherokee, and we got on this road out there that kind of went around, and just I thought it was to nowhere. And the sides, it was just like a road, but it kind of had stones in the road. We come upon this. It looked like a deserted town.
Okay.
And it was out in the middle of nowhere. And we didn't know if somebody owned it or if that was somebody's property, so we just turned around and left because I didn't want to get shot.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I was young, too, back then. And I think I was like 17, and it didn't have a good, it just didn't have a good feel about it.
Right.
But, if you want me to tell a few stories, I've got a few that I can.
Yeah, yeah. If you whatever you want to do, but I'm just saying that those towns, those ghost towns, those abandoned towns, are a perfect place for, like The Hills Have Eyes. That movie from the 70s, that was based roughly on feral human beings living in these old abandoned towns where nuclear testing and crap like that was done.
Right.
So I mean, these things can live anywhere, and I'm saying things because they've kind of lost humanity. Living with nature, you've kind of really separated yourself from humanity at that point, and then you've kind of just really, you're almost like your own species at that point, after generation and generation of change like that. So, but yeah.
You got your own language, everything. Yeah.
Real strange.
And that place up there was it looked like it was built out of stone. It didn't look like there was a lot of ivy.
Okay.
I remember ivy growing on. So it'd been, empty for a long time. I mean, I don't know for how long, because like I said, I didn't even know it was there.
Right.
But it did. It looked pretty rough. It just looked creepy.
Yeah.
There was no glass in what few windows we seen. But it went further down in there. But we didn't go into the town because, like I said, we thought it might be somebody's. And there was a road into it, and you'd had to have a good 4-wheel drive, but you could have got into it with a 4-wheel drive.
Right.
And so.
Yeah, that's pretty creepy, man.
It is. You go out there and I don't know what happened to the people unless they just up and left it.
Right.
Yeah.
That's strange. Yeah, but I mean that they obviously left for a reason. I'm sure back in the day, like before electricity and stuff like that, like look at Alaska, look at Portage, Alaska. People just left the town. They were like, there's monsters coming in from the woods. Let's get out of here. I'm sure that happened more than once to towns throughout our country and throughout the world, probably.
Yeah, and when they disappear, people disappear like that, you don't know what happened.
Right.
I mean, there's nothing to tell you. There's no one there to tell you what happened, or if they are somebody, then they didn't want to tell it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Because especially back then, who's going to believe it? I mean, people can get out here and go all their lives and not see nothing in the woods.
Yep.
And then people start coming up missing, and people start wondering how, why.
Yeah.
And what you was talking about, them coming down and grabbing from the trees. Something that I wanted to say here about that was, you ever notice that in the movies things happen, but it's also happening for real out here? Where do they get the stuff from out of the movies? Like you always see a Bigfoot or something reaching down and grabbing somebody up into a tree.
Yep.
Where do they get that from?
Yeah, exactly.
And the werewolves and monsters and stuff, they look just like, people can describe them. Some of them haven't, they've not even watched monster movies.
Right.
And they can describe them right down to the T.
Right to a T, actually. You're exactly right. I mean, you've got different movies that, are labeled, you've got Dogmen with the tail and the hocked legs in some movies. Then there's the werewolves that actually represent a werewolf with human-like legs, very muscular body, no tail, shorter muzzle. Yeah, I mean, these movies, I really think there is some sort of insider source, or maybe that's the way the government really wants to just do, not even a soft disclosure, but maybe just to get us used to things like that.
Yeah, you're right. You're definitely right.
It's definitely weird.
I've noticed that on, a lot of movies I watch anymore, is it's just, wow, that I've heard people describe that to the T, and then there's one out where it's a movie, but a lot of people try to say that people took a picture of it, they was filming it, but it's laying there on the road. It looks just like a werewolf that people have described like a white one, and it's breathing, and then it lets out a growl and dies.
Yeah, I know that movie you're talking about, and I know that clip that you're talking about, because that clip actually tricked a lot of people, and it came from two different movies. There was like whoever created that clip combined two different movies. One is called Lobos del Argo or something like that, and then there's kind of I'm gonna say Muslim, but not. It's like a Middle Eastern movie.
Yeah.
With a werewolf in it, and it's that one where you see. So you've got that one dog man where it's dying and it's on the road and it's breathing, or it's not. It's like right there, and then there's the end of that little clip where there's kind of like an army. It looks like an army base, and that one was from the Middle Eastern one, and it was about a werewolf that went crazy. And these people are taking these crazy movies from different countries, combining them and putting them out there and being like, hey, look at this. This is real footage. And no one's to know the wiser unless they've seen the movies or really looked into, just did some research on the photo, reverse searched it or whatever. But yeah, it's definitely that one that is breathing and dying is very, very terrifyingly real.
Yeah. It does. It looks. It does look scary.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
But yeah, they was these right down here, and it was in the city limits of Andrews. Now these young boys down here, they did not know nothing about Bigfoot, Dogman, werewolf. I like to call them crawlers, the white crawlers.
Right.
But they had a Jeep, and one of them was my brother's grandson. He came in, and he was scared to death, and him and his three buddies, they was really scared. They said they would start it up on this place called Robbinsville Mountain. And I had a bad experience up there too, and I'll tell you about it. But
All right.
They happened to stop, and they asked the guy that was driving. He said, "What are you stopping for?" He said, "Look at that. What is that?" And it was it looked like a white creature looking around the tree.
Mm.
And it didn't have no hair on it. He described what everybody calls a rake out here, but he was talking how big it was. And then there was a big black dog come out of nowhere and got in between them and that rake. And it's like it got him, like it was protecting them. That's the way they said it. And they was facing off with each other, but I don't know what happened, because they said they took off. They turned around right there at the turnaround and left. They didn't want to stay there. They was so scared they didn't want to stay there and see what happened.
Right. Yeah. Wow. That's crazy.
Yeah, and and he don't go back up on that mountain anymore.
Can't blame him. Yeah.
And yeah, you had told a story about this girl I dated that thought she was a witch.
Yes.
And she did. She really thought she was a witch, which she may have been. But we had went to Cherokee. She was born on October 31st, Halloween. And we had went to Cherokee that night. Well, she wanted to leave in the middle of the night, and I was sitting on empty. I'd forgot to get gas that night, and I said, "It'll be in the morning before we." Well, she said, "You'll make it to the store," and it was 20-something miles to the store. And I said, "All right, you want to end up on the side of the road? Fine." We made it to the store, that 20-something miles to the store, and I run out right when I pulled into the gas pump. And that blew my mind. But we got gas, and I took her home, and I went home. Well, the next day when I come over, she got a box in the mail, and it was she had kept telling me, or she had got a letter, and she ended up showing it to me, but she had been talking about that she was going to get something that would help her powers or something like that. And she ended up in that box getting a black diamond ring. And she was tickled to death. I mean, she was so happy to get that. And I'm like, she said, "This is what I've been telling you about." I'm like, "Man, this chick's crazy. I need to get away from her." And so that night before we went, I was throwing her a party, and I planned on just leaving in the middle of the party and not going back. And she wanted to ride up on Robbinsville Mountain, this place. Well, we went all the way to the top, and we were smoking, and we smoked up there, and she said, "Let's go." She said, "I'm getting a bad feeling." And so I was ready to go anyway. But we took off down that road, and she said, "They're after us. They're after us." And I said, "What's after us?" And she kept pushing me to go faster, and she said, "The Hellhounds are after us." I said, "What?" And she said, "There's 4 of them. There's 3. Yeah, I think, yeah. Or there may have been 2 black ones. It's hard. 2 or 3 black ones and 1 red one." And I was like, "Yeah, okay. I want to get off here too." Out of my side mirror, my rear view mirror, I kept seeing flashes of something. And then she said she was laid up, curled up, laying in my seat with her head on my lap, and she had her knees drawn up. And she said, don't let it touch me, don't let it touch me. And I was like, don't let what touch you? And she had had a miscarriage when she was younger. And her boyfriend had beat her up pretty bad, and she ended up having an abortion. Not abortion, I'm sorry, but a miscarriage. And I said, it's all right, it's all right. But I put my hand on her leg, and then all of a sudden it felt like on the top of my hand that something had touched me with a hot iron poker. That's how hot it felt. And when I jerked my hand back, it looked like a baby's hand, a small baby's hand on the top of my hand.
Wow.
And it was really, really red. And then I just happened to look. I seen something out of the corner of my eye, and I seen what looked like a red dog running up in the woods and running down beside of us, but it was a pretty good ways away. And when we got down to the bottom of the road down there, she said, they're gone. They can't bother us no more. And I thought to myself, hell no, they ain't bother us no more, because I ain't going to be around you. And I took her to the party, and she got over there sitting with some people, and I just snuck out the door, and I ain't had nothing to do with her since then.
Yeah.
And that really blowed my mind, but that mark stayed on my hand for like a week till it finally went away.
Wow.
And, a lot of people know, from around here that I was telling the truth, because she dated a few people after that, and she pulled that stuff on them, and it freaked them out. So I don't know what exactly happened with them, but I didn't ask them, didn't want to know, and I just wanted gone. I wanted it all gone.
Yeah, absolutely. That's terrifying. Now, when you said you saw that, like the hellhound, that apparition or whatever running through the woods, was it like, when you said it was red, was it like a glowing red?
Yeah, it's like it was real dark, but I could see it. But it was almost like a ghost. But it shone, I mean, it didn't put out like a flashlight or nothing like that. It just, you could see it running. You could just see it.
Right.
And the black ones behind us, I'd see like apparitions in my tail lights of stuff moving, and it'd be like a dog. And I'm like, this is crazy. And like I said, I was young back then. I was working night shift and just trying to make it.
Yeah,
I didn't need that.
No,
I didn't need
definitely
that at
did
all.
not. That'd freak me right out. I remember when you sent that to me, and I was
Yeah,
like, whoa.
That was really, I mean, like I said, here we go. Even back then, I was like, man, why's this got to happen to me?
Yeah.
And then it just, more and more and more stuff just kept happening. And, just last year, me and my daughter was over on Nanahoe River not camping, but fishing. And I went to my favorite fishing hole, and I was standing there fishing, and I was just, you had to catch and release, and I'd caught a big old fish. And I thought, man, I ought to keep this. And I thought, I don't want to get in trouble. So I'd let it go. And there was 3 guys probably 50 yards below me, and they was fly fishing. They was wading out in the river. Next thing I know, you hear a limb break or a tree break or something, and out comes this rock about the size of a bowling ball, straight out from almost at the top and hits right in the middle of the river, and probably 15 yards from the three guys down there. I said, no, not again. And them guys, one of them hollered, said, he pointed up in there and he said, what is that? What is that? And they just started making a dash for their vehicle. I think it was a Bigfoot up in there that was throwing a rock. It wasn't I say it was the size of a bowling ball, but it wasn't a round rock. It was, just big rock.
Right.
And I ain't been back over. I ain't wanted to go back over by myself, and so I had to wait and somebody go with me, and then because it must have hit something as it was coming out, as it throwed it, or because there wasn't no rock slid down, so it wasn't a rock slide, and a rock slide wouldn't have throwed it
in the middle there.
30 yards out.
Yeah. It would have just been right on the edge of the river,
And he hit right in the middle of the river.
Yeah. No, I'm saying if it was a rock slide, it would just would have went down the side of the mountain and just, rolled into the water a little bit, not right in the middle where them guys were.
Yeah, and there's a lot of cliffs and caves up in there.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, a lot of people talk about seeing stuff in the woods as they go up in there through there at night, and they don't say, they just see stuff in the woods and they don't know what it is.
Right.
And then there's also a guy. They cut the grass on the 4 lanes and all that. And he, on the tractors and stuff with bush hogs.
Mm-hmm.
They was out here on a 2-lane road, and they had pulled over. 3 or 4 of them did, and they was cutting grass. They was taking a break from cutting grass, and they was sitting there eating their lunch, and all of a sudden they heard a scream. They said at first it sounded like a siren. That Bigfoot sound, it sounds,
like a bellow, kind of.
Yeah. And then it went off again, and it was coming from across the road up on the mountain from where they were sitting, and on the behind them, it was a drop off into what they call the Little Tennessee River that runs into Montana Lake.
Okay.
And they happened to look, and they was seeing something standing up there, and it would step out and it would scream. And they said it had a set of lungs on it that and they said it had to be huge for them to see it that far up. Well, they believe they're big believers now, and because they all got on their tractors and quit lunch and went to mowing again as quick as they could, and they said that they've heard and seen stuff that they ain't told people about.
Right.
And there's an older man on Burningtown Gap that a friend of mine, I talked to him, and he said that he has Bigfoot, and he called them wolves come around a lot. He said the wolves he said the Bigfoot are there certain times of the year, and then what we call Dogman, but he said the wolves are there a certain time of the year.
Right.
But they're not there at the same time. And Brian said he had shutters on his windows that he locked every night. So, and he was a real, not a real older man, but he was probably in his 70s, late 70s.
Wow.
And he said that...
Just imagine the stories he could tell you, huh?
Yeah, see, that's what I talked to Brian about. He told Brian to come back up in there, come back and see him. He could tell him some stories, and Brian told me that he'd take me back up in there, and I'd take a tape recorder and let the man talk. I'd let him talk all day, but I don't believe I want to stay in there at night.
No, definitely not. Definitely not.
Because they're in there, and it's called Little Burning Town.
Okay.
And there's another one called Big Burning Town, and they've been a couple of things seen up there. But people just say, yeah, I've seen stuff up there. But they won't tell you about it because they think you're not going to believe them.
Right, think you're crazy, or stereotype them as just hill people that are crazy, this and that. And I've had a subscriber that reached out to me that lived out in West Virginia, and they started their sentence with, "I'm from West Virginia, and you probably won't believe this because of the stereotype of people that live here, but," and it was one of the strangest stories that I had ever heard. It was about like these people living up, the family, the person telling me the story was related to this family, and they went up to visit family members. There was a death in the family, and they ended up burying the person who died in their family cemetery. And the guy looked out the window and he said, "I saw this creature." He said, "I can't describe it. It didn't look like a mammal. It almost looked like a bug, kind of, this huge creature, bug-like creature that came out of the woods and dug up the grave." And sure as can be, the guy got up in the morning, the family got up, and the grave, where the person was laid to rest, there was a hole there. The body was still there. It didn't dig all the way down, but there was a hole there. And when he saw the hole there, he got his kid and his wife, and they left.
I don't blame him. Wow. And those stories like that, or encounters like that, 99.9% are the truth.
Yeah.
The crazier they are, the more truth they are.
Yep. Yeah, there's things out there that are scary. I mean, we're talking about Dogman and Bigfoot and werewolves because they're scary, But there are things that seldom are seen but are so much scarier than these three creatures,
Yeah. You're right. It makes you wonder what they've run into.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And because, you take a rake. A rake has to have been grown. I mean, in a lab.
I think so. I really think so.
I just don't, things like that, you just don't, where would they come from?
Mm.
And it just, that's really crazy. That's really, when they was telling me about it, just over here in Tennessee, there was a guy got one on film, a crawler,
mm-hmm.
or a rake.
Rake, yeah.
He got it on his game camera.
Okay.
And he was in it with Dogman were trying to kill him, like Luke. He's having problems. And it was over here in Tennessee somewhere. But I can't remember where I heard that at, but...
Yeah, I don't know where these things... I mean, part of me thinks that, like you said, they came from a government lab, maybe from like Montauk or whatever in New York.
Yeah.
Or could be some sort of alien hybrid, whatever. But, I hate the word the rake because the creepypasta, and I truly believe creepypastas ruin cryptozoology because, it gets people confused. But I believe they exist, there's so many sightings of these things, and the videos that are out there from a normal Joe, that doesn't have the ability to do CGI or this or that catches these crazy videos and throws them up on YouTube. There's more videos of them than there are Dogman, Bigfoot. So I mean, they've got to exist. They're terrifying. I don't like them, but I don't know. I hate that word, the rake.
I know. A rake to me is what you rake the leaves and stuff up with.
Yeah.
That's, I don't know how they come up with a name like that for it.
Yeah. It's definitely a strange name. Now.
But yeah, Terry, he didn't feel good tonight. His back was really hurting him, and my brother, but we'll come on Friday night, or not Friday night, but Monday night.
Yeah, that sounds like a plan. Me and you were talking a little bit earlier about your encounter in Georgia and how you had shared that with someone else, and there were some people asking you a couple questions or whatever in the comment section or something.
Yeah,
do you want to address that?
Yeah, I see. When I first shot it, I first shot it and it hit it in the mouth. That's the only blood I saw.
Okay.
But it made a sound when I shot it, and like I said, I just emptied my gun. Now I seen some other eyes out in the brush, and it seemed like some of those was yellow, and they may have been a couple of them that was red, but I think those was coyotes. I think this thing was running with a pack of coyotes, and they may have been a couple more of those, like this one.
Yeah.
But I couldn't have made that sound that they was making, that it made when I shot it, because it was a sound I'd never heard that an animal make.
Right.
And then let's see, what was the other one? I'm trying to remember what the other question was. I can't remember right offhand.
Okay.
But
was
wondering about
who you shared that with back in the day. Do you want to tell everybody who you had shared that story with originally?
Oh yeah, it was Brenton Sawin.
Yeah.
It's about 3 or 4 or 5 years ago.
About that, yeah.
I mean, I didn't go back. I went back and listened to it. But they can listen to it if they want to.
Is it still on? I think we were trying to figure out if his stuff was still on YouTube. For those of you who don't know, he was a channel like mine, and he was a great guy, really good channel, real good researcher, and he had passed about 2 years ago, I'd say.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
He ended up with cancer and passed away. He thought he just had an infection and ended up in the hospital.
Big loss to the community, yeah.
Yeah, and everybody liked him. Except a few, they wanted to. He needed help and stuff. Which everybody does when they're down that bad. And some people wanted to put him down, but afterwards they apologized because they realized then that
they really didn't know, They really didn't know how sick he was. But,
right.
The thing is the guy he went in the hospital thinking he had an infection. He was in the hospital and he needed help paying his medical bills. And he made, I think, 2 or 3 videos while he was in the hospital. And these haters were like, da-da-da-da-da on him.
Mm-hmm.
And then he passed away. And I remember that video. I think his daughter did the video about him dying, and it was sad when I found. And I didn't I was just starting out, when he had passed, and I had only wished that I had a chance to just talk with the guy, because he really was from what I've seen and heard from other people, he was a real decent dude.
Yeah, he had a Bigfoot reach in his tent.
Really?
Yeah, that's what got him started. Bigfoot reached in his tent, and I think it either grabbed his arm or rubbed his arm or something, and that really freaked him out. He laughed about it, then, but he wasn't laughing at first.
No, definitely not.
Oh, they was one story. There was this woman that she had a bull mastiff.
Mm-hmm.
Her and her husband had a bull mastiff, and bull mastiff's a big dog. Well, it come up missing, and they went looking for it, and all they found was his head.
Jesus.
And at the edge of the forest, they couldn't find the rest of the body. And so, that I think that was one of the stories that I'd told him about, and that was they was really tore up, and a lot of people was kind of freaked out because what kills a bull mastiff and just leaves its head? That was just right across the line over here in Georgia.
Wow, that's yeah. Bull mastiffs are a big dog. You don't think about a dog like that being able to get taken out quick, but there's other larger things in the woods than those guys. So.
Yeah, I know. My son, he's raising Rottweilers and bully pits, and where he's bought him a house is way back in the woods. I mean, really, really way back. And I know there's stuff in there, and because I've talked to people that lives close to down there, and they've seen stuff, and so.
What do they see?
They've seen Bigfoot, and they've seen big walking around. They say they look like wolves.
Okay.
But they've never seen them upright. But they've seen, they say they're big as a small cow.
Wow.
So you know what that is? That's a Dogman.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's hard to get a lot of people to tell their stories because they're scared that somebody's gonna make fun of them.
Mm-hmm.
And I try to make them. I tell them my stories and what happened to me, and it still won't bring it out of them. They must think I'm just telling that, trying to get them to tell me what was said. But every now and then I can find people that will tell it.
Yeah.
But I'll give you a good one here.
All right.
There was a guy. He showed me a picture on his. It wasn't a very good one. He showed me a video. At the bottom of his yard, there was a Bigfoot, and this dude didn't know nothing about him. So I know the video wasn't fake. I just seen something big and black run on two legs, and he told me I could come up there any time. But he said, I'm going to tell you, he said there was a girl came up there, and she asked if she could build a fire right below his trailer down there and stay there that night. He said, yeah, go right ahead, but you won't stay there long. And she said, okay. But she went down and built a fire, and he said she started chanting, doing weird stuff, and singing and everything. And he said it wasn't about 10 minutes. She come up through there, and she was shirtless and didn't have no bra on. And she was running, saying there was a monster after her. And he looked down there, and sure enough, there stood that Bigfoot. it had scared her to death. And before he could get his tablet out to take a picture, that's all he had to take a picture of with. She was in her car and gone, and this thing was gone. He had to go down there and put the fire out.
Wow.
And that was wild. That when he told me about that, and
That's crazy.
He could really tell it. The way he told it. He said he tried to keep her from going down there. He warned her.
Yeah.
And she didn't listen to him. But she had left some things down there, and he's got them put up in his building, and she ain't come back to get them.
That's insane.
And yeah, I went. There was a girl that lived right below him, and she asked me to come by. She had some stuff to show me. On her window, where her screen is, you could see where a handprint had pushed that window, and it had cracked her window. And this was right at her kids' room. But on that screen, you could see. Now this was. It dwarfed my hand, because I put my hand up to it, and it dwarfed my hand. And I took some pictures of it, and it's on that phone that I've got there too, that I need to get it unlocked. But it was a massive hand. And I told my daughter, she was with me, to stay in the car and keep the doors locked. And we walked around, me and this guy that was there with her, we walked around to the front of the trailer, and you could see handprints on the living room window, and that had to be at least 8 foot up. And she said that its head was sitting there looking in at her, with its hands on the window, right there beside of it, just looking in the window.
Yeah.
And well, we started back around the trailer, something hit the side of the trailer, and I said, "We're being watched. Something just threw a rock or something at this trailer, or at us." And when I went around, me and Nate went around the trailer, my daughter had her door open. And next thing I know, the neighbors right below us, I don't know what kind of gun they shot. To me, it sounded like a stick of dynamite. It went off, and I started to hit. I hit the ground, because I thought that it was throwing something at us, and it hit the side of the house. But it was a gun, either a gunshot or a stick of dynamite. Something went tearing through them woods up there, and I screamed at my daughter. I said, "Taylor, shut that door. What do you got the door open for? What did I tell you?" I think it was watching her and us, and it could have reached in and got her and been gone.
Yeah.
And they was 2 big old giant pine trees, and it would have took a lot to move them. There was not a bit of wind, but when it was running, it must have hit those trees, and they was shaking. You could see the top of them shaking, and that freaked me out. And she come when, I don't know what the neighbors down there was shooting at or whatever they was doing, but I'm glad they did. And they was at Laurel again. They was Laurel where Taylor's door was open, and she didn't listen to me, and that may have been God's way when that guy shot or whatever he did. It scared it, and it run. When it looked in the window at her and looked in her kid's window, she had called the sheriff's department. They had come out, and they thought it might have been, what do they call them, vagrants? Sometimes. Okay, they went back into the woods. They was 3 deputies. They went back in the woods, and they said that they was beddings all around where the trail led to, not far from her back door. And they come out of there quick, and they said they wasn't coming back in there. They would not go back in them woods again. I don't know if they saw something other than those beddings or what, but they said they wasn't going back in there. And
wow.
so they was.
You know you're in trouble, or you know there's an issue when police officers won't go somewhere.
Oh, I know it. I know it. And it just, I'm just glad my daughter's here with me still.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Because, I've thought about that many times. And around here, too. What goes on around here, just something could grab her up and be gone, and I wouldn't know where she's at. And when I can't find her, or she's out doing something around here and I don't know where she's at, it scares me. Now, which I don't have to know every move she makes, but I'd like to know where she's at.
You're just a concerned dad, like me. Now, where Dennis Martin went missing, how are you close to that area?
Which one?
The Dennis Martin, the little boy from like 1960s, 1950. The little boy that went missing, and they sent the Green Berets in. And they said that they had seen boy was hiking with his family. He was like 6, and I think it was in the Great Smokies, and
it was. He was playing hide
and seek with his family, with his cousins or whatever. Now, are you close to that area or no?
No, that's closer to Cage Cove over there.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's.
You're on the other side. There. You're on the other side, right?
Yeah, that's closer to Tennessee. But yeah, he was just playing, and they said they seen a man that looked like he had a sack over his shoulder.
Yeah,
this was a couple miles away.
Yeah, a red sack, but he was ironically wearing a red sweatshirt.
Yeah, and they said the man that was carrying it looked like he had animal skins on him.
Yeah, yep. I really think that it was a feral human that got that boy. I don't think it was a Bigfoot. I don't think it was Dogman. I really think feral human got that boy. I think that's one of the biggest reasons why they sent the Green Beret in, was to, put an end to, you got one feral human. Usually there's more than one. They live in pods and or families, whatever you want to call it. And I think that's why they sent them in.
Yeah. But they, the daddy, he was tore up. They never would tell him nothing.
No. I could never imagine going through something like that.
I know it. It scares me to death, like I said about my daughter, because it's just been me and her for 14 years. I've raised her by myself for 14 years, and I don't know what I'd do if something was to happen to her.
No, I completely hear you there. I completely hear you. It's definitely a scary thought, especially as they get older, and especially where you live down in the, you've got sightings. I mean, she's already had friends that had sightings and stuff like that and called you to get her out of there.
Yeah, I know it. and her friend has to deal with that every night.
That's terrifying. How far away is that from your house?
Probably about 8 miles. Around 8 miles, 5 to 8 miles, somewhere in there. And You know, it's over in what they call Peachtree, and which, you know, these other people seen them. Like this one woman, she said that she was walking her dog, and it was close to where this girl lived, and said they was two Bigfoot jumped off the top of the small hill and walked right in front of her, never paid her one bit of attention, and walked into the woods on the other side and just disappeared. And she run back and called the law or the sheriff's department. They wouldn't even come out there.
Wow.
So,
insane.
and they was a deputy sheriff, female.
Mm-hmm.
She was going to a call like that, and she wrecked her car in a big old hole. And I don't know how she did it, if something run out in front of her or what, but they fired her. And, you know, if you're on a call and something happens, you know, why would they fire you?
Right. Unless she saw something and they were afraid she was going to talk.
Exactly. So they decided to run her credibility.
Yeah.
And, you know, over here in Blyersville, they've some been seen on the Cleveland Highway going into Cleveland, Georgia, and Blyersville, Georgia, between Blyersville and Cleveland Highway. They've been Bigfoot seen crossing the road there. And then there's a guy, and I've been trying to think of his name because I'd really like to get up with him because he's got some stories. I've got him on Facebook, but I cannot remember his name, but I will eventually find it. But he's talked about, he's got Dogman, his property borders WMA, the Suches part of it in Georgia.
Okay.
And he's seen them in his field, and he got out and shot at them because he was tired of them. He had the dragon breath and shells and shot at them, and I reckon they run, and they ain't bothered him since. He did that, but he said that he can walk out at night, and he knows he can hear the low growl, and he just goes on to his truck.
Mm.
But he's always got his pistol.
Yeah.
And he walks to his truck to go to work, and they've been a lot of them there, and I'm gonna try to get up with him and talk to him, you know, and then maybe get him to come on and talk. If I can get him on there, I'm pretty sure he'll come on and talk to you.
That'd be fun. That'd be a good time. Yeah.
Yeah, he can.
When you said growl, you reminded me of. Well, I don't mean to bring it up again, but when we were talking earlier about when you shot that Dogman, and you said when you had finally emptied out your rifle and you pulled out your pistol, that it kind of grinned at you. Yeah, it grinned at you or whatever.
Yeah, that's what it was. Yeah. See, I emptied my pistol.
Yeah.
I shot it with my pistol, and I was reaching down to get my rifle, and it looked at me, and I looked back at it, and it was looking at me, and it was growling, but it looked like a grin. So I don't know if it was grinning like, "Hey, I've got you," you know, "You're dead meat,"
right?
You know, or something like that. But when I got my rifle, its whole attitude changed, and you know, and I started popping it with it. And plus, you know, that gun was so loud, it was, and 7 shots knocked it back in the woods, and I throwed a couple more on in the woods, and it just, you know, I didn't talk about that before, you know, but I did. I throwed a couple more out, which was stupid, because I you know, I like to know what I'm shooting at, but
right.
I was just scared,
yeah.
and I just wanted everything gone.
Yeah. Yeah, that's crazy. It's crazy just thinking about it. You know, the more I thought about after the first interview when we talked about it, and the guy who was in charge of the hunting club, you know, said that you didn't put your fire out and this and that, and you know, there was just a lot of craziness around that whole freaking experience that you had. And you know, it really shows when you shared that whole way, the way that you shared it and the way that you described everything and the way that people were talking to you, it really showed how they cover it up. And they are not afraid to, obviously, if they're not afraid to set fire to a small forest, they're not afraid to do anything they have to cover these things up.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, you know, the guy, the owner, he was like, "You didn't put your whole fire out." I said, "I did. I even kicked sand over it."
Yeah.
But when we got down there, you know, the big guy said, well, he had a game warden set over too next to him, and he said, "Well, you did put your fire out, because it was, when you pour water over it, it kind of it crusts up." And he said, "I can see where it's crusted up and everything."
Yeah.
And so he knowed that my fire is out, but all my brass was laying there, and he said, "What did you shoot at over here?" And I just said a pack of coyotes, because I thought, if I tell him I shot at a werewolf, what's they gonna do? And he told me, "You stick with that story right there, and we'll all be all right."
Yeah, that's very...
Or we'll all be fine. That's what he said.
It's very unsettling to know that how far they really will go to cover these things up. So, listen, I know that you took some time out of your night to chat with me, because you did promise me, and you're a man of your word. I appreciate it. I'm looking forward to having you and your brother Terry on Monday. Do me a favor, don't hang up, but we'll end the interview. That way you can get on with the rest of your night. But I want to talk to you for a few minutes after. All right, buddy?
Okay.
All right.
Yeah, no problem.
It was good talking to you, and I really appreciate it, and I'm really looking forward to having you and your brother on so we can talk about that one, the email that I have sat on for years, and I think that's going to be a good upload. So.
Yeah. I'm glad to be in here, man. I always love it.
Definitely. All right, don't hang up, all right, buddy?
Okay, brother.
All right, guys. That was the interview with Jody. I know we were gonna have his brother on, and like he said, his brother's not feeling well. His brother's had some really bad back issues, and so, tonight we kind of filled it in with some stuff that we were just shooting the breeze about earlier. And, I'm looking forward to having his brother on, because his brother reached out almost 3 years ago. And he sent me an email, and when a subscriber sends me an email, I print them out. I make a file, and I've sat on it for that long. I respected his wishes because he asked me not to share it, and I did, until he was ready. Now, when Jody reached out to me, I, immediately said, "I know who you are. I know your brother sent me this email, da-da-da-da-da." And then we talked a little bit, and he said, "Wow, I can't believe you've been sitting on it." Jody didn't realize that I had that email sent to me that long ago. And it's important to me that if a person is going to have the courage to come and share their encounter, whether it be in an interview or an email where I narrate it, I want them to be able to trust me 100%. Anonymity is always respected. Their wishes are always respected because I know how hard it is to share your experience when you may have shared it before to someone, a friend or a family and member, and gotten ridicule. It's a hard thing to talk about. So looking forward to that interview. Jody's a great guy. And yeah, so with that, I hope you guys enjoyed the upload, and may the Great Spirit watch over us, and may He guide us down that path that we call life.